welcome the guy who's known across the country in GIS circles as the UPS guy, Jack.
Thank you, Bruce. Actually, you took a little bit of my opening away. I'm a Director of Process Management for UPS. My job is to figure out where we're going to be in the next 5-10 years when it comes to methods, procedures, systems, processes. At the appropriate time, I bring projects to our C-suite, ask for funding, we work with IT. I'm not an IT person, but we manage the project, we come up with the requirements, and when we're done testing and make sure the gains are there, we turn it over. I was going to mention, I'm not a GIS guy, and I've never brought a GIS project to our C-suite. I bring business process changes to the C-suite, and that's what I care about. Like, really, I don't mean to offend you, but I could care less about the GIS, I care about the business process, and that's what we look at. Now, if you see GIS in the middle of that, that's great, because you'll see that throughout the presentation, but I'll talk about business processes. Two of my divisions are advanced analytics divisions. I've got a number of PhDs, mathematicians in those two divisions. In the book, The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, he mentions them. I call them think tanks, supply chain experts, and similarly, we bring them inside the process as well. We'll use analytics deeply inside our process change. We're pretty proud that Gartner awarded us the Business Intelligence Excellence Award for our work that you'll see here. So you'll see about 15 years worth of work in a very quick presentation, and then an insight into the next 15 years that we're going to be working on. I do want to talk about analytics. That's really what I'm going to talk about. And I've already heard that term a number of times today, analytics. So I want you to understand what analytics is and have a framework so we can discuss it, because I really think this is the key change for business, is the use of data and the understanding it. So on the bottom is a quote, the definition of analytics from the Institute of Operations Research and Management Science. I love that definition. The scientific process of transforming data into insight for making better decisions. On the left is what's generally accepted as three forms of analytics. It starts with descriptive analytics, and that says, where am I? You move from there to predictive analytics to prescriptive analytics. Again, the movement of analytics goes from where am I, what's happened already, if nothing changes, what's going to happen, and then really what's the best that can happen. In the prescriptive analytics, you're talking about optimization. Most organizations, most consultants will point out that as you move up this hierarchy of analytics from descriptive to predictive to prescriptive analytics, your business gains will grow, your skill set needed will grow, your data needs are going to grow as you move up that hierarchy. And that's an important piece of the puzzle. So again, it's easy to describe with people. Descriptive analytics, where am I? Predictive analytics, where am I headed? Prescriptive analytics, where should I be headed? This is a slide from Gartner. They talk about the same levels of analytics, descriptive, predictive, prescriptive. They add another one in the middle. I think they call it diagnostic. And that says not only what happened, but why did it happen? Take a look at the Gartner slide. This is interesting to me. This is the percent of organizations that are using this type of analytics, getting business insight from their data. Only 70% of organizations know where they sit today. And when you talk about optimizing your business, only 3%. This is the key change that businesses are going through. How do I take advantage of the data that I have to get business gain? And in the last two areas where the greatest gain exists, that's where the fewest businesses are taking advantage. This is the change happening in business right now. For UPS, we've been up that hierarchy. We'll talk about the movement up this hierarchy today. But we started even earlier with what we call methods and measurement, industrial engineering. We had work measurement on every single job. We have job descriptions on every single job. And then we moved up that hierarchy starting over 20 years ago. So I'm not going to go through these definitions. You'll see these through the slides. But you'll notice that we started doing descriptive analytics, which only 70% of organizations are doing over 20 years ago. And then prescriptive analytics with 3%, we started that in 2012. So I think this is why CIO Magazine has pointed out some of the things we've done or some of the 20 greatest ideas to steal in 2013, even though we deployed them over 20 years ago, or over 10 years ago. So let's talk about descriptive analytics. Let's put that framework on what UPS has done. And descriptive analytics is all going to start with data gathering. And you need a data and infrastructure, and you need to think about the future uses of that data. The data needed to predict is different than the data you need to describe. And if an organization wants to think about where they're headed, they need to think about the data for predictive. And you're going to need analysis tools and visualization tools at this stage of the game. For us, we have this device, we call it a DIAD. It stands for Delivery Information Acquisition Device. We deployed this over 20 years ago, and you can see the evolution of the DIAD over time. I do want you to look at the one second from the right. We call that a DIAD 4. That was built to change what a DIAD is. DIAD stands for Delivery Information Acquisition Device, and we wanted to change it from an acquisition device where drivers keyed in all day to an assistant, give them information to help make better decisions. That's why that device is different than the others, and we continue to have the DIAD 5. As we're talking about DIADs, I know this is a GIS conference. We designed that 13 years ago. Remember 13 years ago, you didn't have GPS chips inside all of our smartphones. I don't even think we had smartphones. We struggled whether to build a GPS chip inside of the DIAD. It was $30 a piece at the time. And we finally decided we wanted to do so. We didn't know what we were going to do with the data, but we put a GPS chip in there. And you'll see through the presentations what we did with it. We had another data gathering element for our business, and we call that telematics. So we not only had the DIAD gathering data, we now put another unit on the vehicle. We have a GPS device inside the vehicle as well, so there's two. But we also put in sensors. We know everything going on from the vehicle itself. We know what codes the engine is sending out. We have sensors to know if a seatbelt's on, if the door behind the driver's open or not. We even know if the vehicle's backing or if there's idle time of the vehicle. The key is we put all of that data together and merge it with the map so that we get very diverse use of the exact same data throughout the business. Again, we're describing. So we can very quickly look and see if a driver has a seatbelt on and where. If a driver just drives a few feet without a seatbelt on, the system will point it out to us, and we can go ahead and have a discussion with the driver. We know if the driver's leaving the vehicle running without shutting it off as they're making a delivery. That shouldn't happen. This will point it out to us as well. And then, of course, we use satellite imagery for context. This is a backing event. We really don't want to back in a residential area. This descriptive analytics will point that out to us as well. We used to know what went on with a driver by when we called on-the-job supervision rides, and we did it about 2-3 times a year, and it took 8 or 9 hours to complete. We can now evaluate and have a discussion with the driver in about 45 minutes. So it's really allowed us to make our fleet more safe and more efficient just by using the data and evaluating what happened yesterday. Remember Gartner talked about diagnostic analytics, and I've got 4 kids, so I watched a lot of Sesame Street. Do you remember that segment where they go, which one of these is different than the others, and they sing a song? Well, if you put math to that, and you can mathematically say what's different, and instead of looking at kids, you said what vehicles are behaving differently than the others, that tells you a vehicle that's getting ready to brake. So we have sensors on all, 200 sensors on our vehicles. If we find out that a vehicle or a part is behaving different than its peers, that means that vehicle's going to have a breakdown in the future. It allows us to wait until a vehicle tells us it needs to be repaired, rather than replacing parts proactively. So we've simultaneously reduced the amount of breakdowns we have on road and reduced our cost all at the same time through the use of analytics. Talk about processes. This is just the tool that the mechanic sees, but this tool is what they see every single day, and this is what will point out to them what is going wrong with their vehicle fleet. So again, everything has to be built inside the process. Analytics can't be outside the process of what the frontline employee is using. So we talked about descriptive analytics in a whirlwind, but the problem with descriptive analytics is you're always looking at yesterday. So how do I change tomorrow if everything's looking in the rearview mirror? So if you look at this chart, there's a few things of yesterday that I don't like. There's some deliveries in the blue area that should be in the brown area. But how do I get tomorrow changed if you're always looking yesterday? So we went down the path to predictive analytics to let us look at what's going to change in the future and truly change the business. Again, as we talk about predictive analytics, likely you need different data than you needed to describe yesterday. It's going to require supporting systems and infrastructure to plan for tomorrow. It's going to require people that know how to forecast. But a couple of areas that really are missed in many of the literature is you need ways to simplify the work. If I'm going to change what somebody does tomorrow, how do I communicate that to them? So we have to have a way to not only know what's happening, know what's going to happen, but communicate the change that you want to happen to the individual. So let me tell you a little bit about our process so you can see what we worked on and completed about 10 years ago. The left is what a vehicle looks like if you were loading it. The right is a schematic of the shelves within the vehicle. And what we do is we load the vehicle in the general order that the driver is going to deliver, starting with the upper right-hand shelf if you're looking in the vehicle from the back. So the driver delivers things generally from the upper right-hand shelf, then goes to the lower right-hand shelf, the upper left, etc. So the way the vehicle's loaded can drastically change the effectiveness of the driver on road. Just to point out the numbers, 1 mile per driver per day in the US alone is worth about $50 million, or up to $50 million. So not loading the vehicle right, which could cause the driver to backtrack, which could cause the driver to look for a package, could be very expensive. So we care a lot about how that vehicle is loaded. Well, we had a bottleneck 10 years ago, and that was how do I communicate to that person in the red and white hat that has to load the vehicle? For that person to do their job, they had to have a tremendous amount of information in their head. They had to know the needs of every customer. They had to know what the general order of delivery is for every driver. They had to have some knowledge of geography. In order to do their job, it took about 3 to 6 weeks worth of time just for them to learn the work that went into that vehicle. So imagine trying to tell that person, oh, by the way, tomorrow, load this package in a different location. They couldn't mentally handle it. We had to come up with a way to simplify their job so we could take advantage of predictive analytics. Well, what we did is we came up with a data model that we call package flow technologies. Package flow technologies describes electronically where every package is going, where it needs to go, and why it needs to go there. It's a true data model that describes UPS. And with that data model, we could change where we want things to go tomorrow, but now we need to communicate to the person. So we created this label. We call it a PAL label, a preload assist label, to assist the preloader. If you look at it, there's a place, red, brown, A14, that tells different people within the building where this individual package goes for this individual day. The bottom part below that, Route 120, so the preloader's going to put this in Route 120 in a position 1118, and then we have other information like what time the package needs to be delivered by, etc. So we take all the information in our systems and put it in computer models so that we can change tomorrow, but communicate to the person who needs to execute that change. So in today's world, when a package comes in, just before it's loaded, we'll scan the package, we'll come down the belt, we'll scan it, we'll print a label. That label will tell the preloader exactly where to put the package in the vehicle to match that driver's general delivery order. Now I can go ahead and put all my advanced analytics to change tomorrow because we got rid of the bottleneck. The bottleneck, it was an important piece of the puzzle. So what we do is we work on forecasting. When a package is shipped with us, we go through some of our forecasting models and we predict when it's going to end up at the destination building for delivery. We use information on packages we've already picked up that are in our system, and those have a high probability of being in the building on time. There's some packages that have been shipped electronically but we haven't picked up yet. Those have lower probability. And then there's ones with even lower ones than that, and that's historical delivery trends by day of the week, time of year, etc. So we end up with a very nice picture of what it's going to look like for the delivery a few days from now. Then our planning tools take over. And our planning tools will evaluate every route and say which ones have too much work, which ones have too little work, and which ones have inefficient work. So if you look at this route's red, and I can't read the route number, but it's red, it has too much work. The planner grabs some work that's going to happen in the future, and they can do it textually or geographically. They grab the work, they decide what driver is best suited to deliver that work. In this case, it looks like they grab 9 packages, or 9 stops and 12 packages. They'll put it on the driver that's most effective for that delivery day. Then when the package comes in, the label prints and we know exactly where that package goes. So This allows us to plan really with a scalpel instead of an axe. In the future, we'll be planning with a laser, but that's on the roadmap for the next 15 years. Now, we'll make these adjustments all the way through, up until the driver's leaving the building. So at the very last minute, we have every package on the right car, but then we want to make the driver smarter as well. So we changed the dyad from an acquisition device to an assistant. And we do that by giving them information on every delivery they have to make. When I was a driver, the way I knew what I was going to deliver, I walked into the back of the vehicle and I touched cardboard. I kind of walked through the load and I could see where deliveries were going to be. I could see which customers were heavy and I could adjust how I would deliver. Now, rather than touching cardboard, the drivers do their planning in the dyad itself. Now, it's in a general order of delivery. That's the order they see it. They can sort it multiple ways, but you can see in the center there is the address they're going to deliver. To the left is the time the earliest package for that address needs to be delivered, in this case 10:30 in the top row. To the right of the address is how many packages they have. So this driver has one package for 10:30, 6 more that are due to be delivered later on in the day. The driver may or may not deliver all 7 at the same time. They may just deliver the 10:30s, leave, and come back later. To the right is exactly where in the vehicle those packages are, and to the left gives them information like if there's any special CODs or any special customer needs they have to meet. We then indexed information about our customers into our database, and we call it notes or alerts or personalized information for every customer. If the shipper said you have to get a signature on the package, the dyad's smart enough, it's not going to let the driver leave without making that promise. The dyad will make sure we achieve that signature. And then the extra information about the customers is also kept track of. So in this case, this customer says park at the dock, deliver to the mailroom. The bottom one is interesting. That says no indirect, reroute, or left at. This customer says, if I'm not home, this package cannot be delivered to my neighbor. The dyad won't let the driver deliver this package. A neighbor may say, if I'm not home, make sure my package is delivered to a neighbor. The dyad understands the difference between those two and will make sure we meet all of our promises. Now, it's important to note, your regular driver probably already knows this. They're professional, they're on the road every day, they're really the best in the industry. And when that driver's on vacation or when volume grows by 50% during Christmas, somebody else could be servicing that customer. And by pulling the information in people's heads into data, we can now make sure we have the effective service, effective cost every day of the year. Remember the GPS we talked about? We didn't know what we were going to do with it, but we started gathering locations of every delivery. And we find that through GPS drift and driver methods, by not necessarily recording a delivery at exactly the same location all the time, or sometimes they forget and they record that they finished a delivery, later on. But we ended up with these delivery locations for addresses that had some variability to it. Through some advanced mathematics, we were able to throw out all the outliers, and we end up with a picture something like this. A location of where we think a delivery occurs. This is a non-maintenance system. It just happens automatically in the background, and it kind of looks like this. We end up with a database of every address we've delivered and a pretty good location of where they are. After about 4 months, our footprint is about here, and in our database we have about 250 million addresses globally at the moment. So we gathered the data, we weren't sure what we were going to do with it, and we came up with something we call Smart Stop. So we know what deliveries the driver is going to make. We know historically where the latitude and longitude for that delivery is. So we send the delivery location back to the dyad before the driver leaves. If the driver goes to make a delivery within some circle of confidence of where we think that address is, they get a green target and everything's good to go. If they're standing outside of some circle of confidence, they get a raspberry sound and a red target that says go double check. It's a rare event, it really is rare, but sometimes the drivers look at a number and they think they're on Elm Street and they're really on Oak Street. So all they do is they see a house number and they figure what street they're on. So this will warn them of that, and we'll find that needle in a haystack, and it's raised our service levels just a little bit by giving that information back to the driver. When the driver leaves, we don't stop. We send information back to the mothership in real time, maybe about a 5 or 10 minute delay. And so we know for every route, all the deliveries they have, which ones they've completed, which ones they haven't completed yet, and where the driver is. So if a customer calls and wants to meet a driver and they need an on-demand pickup, we dispatch that work, not to the driver who's generally in the area or even who the one that's closest at this moment, but we'll give that work to the driver that will be closest to the customer at the time the customer wants to be served. All right, what have we seen so far? Remember we talked, let's go back to analytics. Descriptive to predictive to prescriptive. So what have we seen just going from descriptive to predictive analytics by building business processes looking forward? Well, this is what we've seen. We've seen a reduction of about 85 million miles a year driven. That's 8.5 million gallons of fuel we're not purchasing, 85,000 metric tons of CO2 that's not going into the atmosphere. If you're looking at that formula on the bottom, that says if you take energy and add information to it, you end up needing less energy. And that's from a first prize paper that we wrote with the University of Georgia about how to use information to actually make brown more green, I guess is a way to say it. We've reduced the time it takes to train loaders. Our service level is the highest in our history. We're almost perfect in our seatbelt usage. But we are poised for new breakthroughs, and I want to talk about that in a minute. We also have added some new services off of this. So if you understand the data infrastructure we built, we have a service we call My Choice. So I'm not trying to sell this to you. In fact, I can't. It's free. But it's a great service, and what we did is we took our internal supply chain that we spent $1 billion on, and we opened it up to our customers. So if you have a package coming to you, you'll get a text message. It's the same message our internal planners would get, because we know the package is coming. If you want the package not delivered to your house because you're not home, you just log on and you change that bit, and it tells us not to send the package to your house if you want to move to a neighbor or to a UPS store. All electronically, to go all the way through the system, and using all the tools I just told you, it'll change where tomorrow happens, and that allows our customers to have more flexibility. On the bottom of My Choice, with the things you can do, there's something called a confirmed delivery window. Now this you do have to pay for, and this is where you can get an appointment. That starts becoming very expensive, giving people appointments as for when we're going to make a delivery. That's a lot harder to do, and that's where we get to prescriptive analytics. That's where we need optimizations. This is what we've been working on for 10 years, and this is the vision for the next 15. It's also what we talked to David Pogue about when you look at that NOVA special. We'll talk about that a little bit. Prescriptive analytics, true optimization. That's going to require the most data. It requires the most accurate data. It requires different data. The people doing the work will need the highest skill sets. For us, we have quite a few PhDs. The front line even needs their skill set upgraded when you move to prescriptive analytics. But then again, this is where the greatest benefit occurs, much more than predictive and descriptive. So we have a tool we call Orion. It stands for On-Road Integrated Optimization and Navigation. It builds from our already rich data infrastructure that we use for predicting tomorrow, but we're going to add to it. So we're going to add a new algorithm, the Orion Brain. That's about 1,000 pages of optimization code. But we needed customized map data. The maps that we've used were not accurate enough to allow us to get to prescriptive analytics, and I think I'll try to point that out to you as we move ahead. It also required different tools. So let's talk about mapping and why this has become such a challenge, why I know more about maps than I've ever wanted to know. Remember we were lucky, we started with knowing where every address is, we have that. Well, now we need to make those points navigable. We have to know that we can get between those points accurately. So what we do is we start with our data. We know how our vehicles drive. And if we see that a vehicle is driving in a location where there's not underlying map data, we get these little red circles. And the red circles are a warning. Go take a look and see if something's wrong. We have about 500 people right now, full-time, deploying this system, so we're fully invested. And then what we do is we update maps based on the data we got from our drivers. We'll actually go ride the streets to make sure that maps are accurate enough for our optimizations. So what I want to do is point out why existing maps do not work for the type of optimizations we're trying to do. I can look at this map, and I know this is a UPS map. I've seen enough maps. I know this is something we enrich. So let me point out to you why. First of all, this is Walmart. You see that? That's an area in Gettysburg, PA. This is Wendy's, and this is the Hampton Inn. Route 30 is the Lincoln Highway in Pennsylvania, and all of these addresses are addressed off of Route 30 or Lincoln Highway. But if you notice, you really can't get to them from Lincoln Highway, at least especially the Hampton Inn. The address is Lincoln Highway, but there's no entrance for Lincoln Highway at all. Same with these, by the way. This is addressed to Lincoln Highway, that's addressed to Lincoln Highway, but you can't get there from Lincoln Highway. So looking at this map, I just happen to know that we enrich this, because it wouldn't look that way. I also know that no map tells you to get to the drive-through window at Wendy's. Our data just knows where our driver goes, so we end up at the drive-through window. This is some off-the-shelf mapping software that you can get from the web. Same area. They also know where Walmart is. They also know where Wendy's is, and they also know the Hampton Inn and these other stores there. So, okay, they have that. It's nice to know where the locations are. How do I get there? That's a problem. So, let's look at the map on the left, the off-the-shelf map. Let's look at the UPS map on the right. If I ask the map on the left, how do I get from Walmart to the Hampton Inn? Here's my path. Now, I've been here, I've stayed at that Hampton Inn long enough. When we shot with David Pogue, that's where we were. Interestingly enough, it has me driving from Wendy's, down the Lincoln Highway, make 3 right turns, drop me off back on the Lincoln Highway, which, by the way, there's no way to get to the Hampton Inn from this location on Lincoln Highway. I also happen to know, by the way, this street doesn't connect. Another fine point, but if you're in your car trying to get to the Hampton Inn, you'll figure it out. You know, you'll see the Hampton Inn sign, you may get a little upset at where it took you, you may go back here and take one of the side streets, you'll figure it out. Imagine an optimization routine that thinks this is the path from one to the other. It'll have me deliver these stores that you can't get to from Lincoln Highway on the way to the Hampton Inn. And if I gave this answer to a professional UPS driver, the driver would have laughed me out the room on saying, go ahead and try to deliver like this. And this is what we struggled with 10 years ago. We had an optimization that worked. We thought it did. We got bad answers because the map was inaccurate. So we've been down this path of making maps accurate enough so our optimizations can work. By the way, this is how you get truly from one to the other. There's a back road, there's an alley, and this is the proper way. I think that's about a half-mile difference between the two. That's $25 million for UPS, just that one instance. For Orion, we looked at the overall process. This is a supervisor. When he goes on road with a driver doing an on-the-job supervision ride, we give him a tablet, and that tablet informs the driver of everything we know. So it knows the travel path, it knows the optimization routines, it knows the right way to move from stop to stop, and he can see very clearly all the deliveries he needs to make. Think of it like a navigation system on steroids. You can see all the different travel paths that the driver should take and the orders of delivery. At some point in the future, this will be in our driver's hands as well. All right. Let's talk about Orion and what it looks like to the driver. Remember, we started with this general order of delivery for the driver. That's what's in the diet to begin with. From the driver's perspective, we're taking the list and we're recalculating it. We're putting it in an order that's specific for this day. So rather than the driver determining how am I going to service all of these different customers with the information we provide, we're going to sort the list for them. We're going to tell them this is the exact order to go ahead and make those deliveries in. So from their perspective, it's just a second order. There's the classic order and the optimized order that they'll see. Tom Davenport, he's known as the father of analytics. He wrote the book Competing on Analytics, Analytics at Work, the #1 Harvard Business Review article in the last 10 years. Tom says that Orion is arguably the world's largest operations research project. So we're proud of that. But if you're sitting here thinking, what's so special? You know, You got updated maps, and now you're just going to sort a list. Why is that a big deal to do, and why do you need a PhD to do that? So let me point this out to you. Here's the number of seconds the Earth has been in existence. The Earth has been in existence about 4.5 billion years, and that's the number of seconds. Average UPS driver has 120 stops. So here's the number of ways to deliver 120 stops. It'll eventually stop. So the key here is, mathematically, it's impossible to figure out the true best way to deliver 120 stops. It's mathematically impossible. No one's ever solved it, no one ever will. But think of the complexity the driver's under. Could the driver have really thought of the best way to deliver those 120 stops? No. They're doing what makes sense to them, and I'll prove it to you in a second. In fact, I'll bet you can't find $500 million. I'll bet you. So when you look at this and all the different ways there are to deliver, the mathematical complexities, the complexities people are under, that's why we need prescriptive analytics. That's why that provides so much business gain, and that's why the world is really interested in organizations that are moving up that ladder. So this gets to the NOVA show. If you've already seen the NOVA show, I'll give you a little background information you might not know. If you haven't seen it, there's a little bit of a spoiler here. But the concept from the producers was, how do you move things faster? And they talked about muscle cars, they talked about racing ships, how do you go faster? But there's a point in time when we worked with the producers where we said there's other ways to go faster, and that's by being smarter, not necessarily by working harder. And that's when we got into the algorithms. That's how we moved to things like traveling salesman problem. When there was an understanding there's better ways to do things through mathematics and through analytics. So we tried to figure out how to explain the complexities to the producers over time. And we decided to come up with an Orion test. David Pogue took the test, but we worked with the producers for quite a while trying to explain to them the complexities. We started with a 25 stop problem. By the way, there's only 15.5 trillion ways to do 25 stops, and that's child's play. But even with that, they failed. Wasn't even close. So we took a route. This is a route in Gettysburg, PA. He does deliver Walmart on this route somewhere. This is a driver's route. There's 140 some stops. Driver's name is Timon. You saw him in the video. But look at this. How would you deliver those 25 stops? And as you start looking at it, it's a little more difficult than you think. Which one do I go to next? You know, how do I actually service these 125 or 147 stops? The problem is much harder than this. This is a toy problem. This is a joke. This is really the problem. The little stars that are yellow have to be serviced by 10:30. The ones that are blue, and there's only one this day, he usually has 2 or 3, that has to be delivered by noon. The shaded area is businesses that have to be delivered earlier in the day rather than later, and the triangles are pickups that have very specific windows. Now how would you do it? And remember the numbers, you know, how wide that was? How Tim figured this out every day. He just made sure he serviced his customers. He couldn't have thought of the very best way. He was just using rule of thumb to make sure he could deliver packages efficiently. So we bring prescriptive analytics into the fold. We gave David this test. We gave him the stops. In fact, we had to simplify the problem, and we said, Orion is going to have to worry about all the time commits. We're going to worry about getting to places at a certain time. You don't have to worry about it. So we're going to handicap Orion. We're going to give David a handicap. And he came up, we taught him how to deliver, we gave him the problem, and this is the route he came up with. That's pretty darn good. When we saw this answer, and he's a brilliant man, we were worried that he would beat Orion. But we went ahead and calculated it. Here are the results. So, who wins? Can you see it? You can't. You can't see which one's better, can you? Nothing, just, so go back. Descriptive analytics. If you looked at this and saw drop one day versus another, you never would have described and said one is better than the other. Predictive analytics, where you said, here's what's going to happen tomorrow, create a route. you never would have found the difference between the two, ever. Would you believe that there's a 10-mile difference between those two? Remember how much it is for UPS a day? If every driver at UPS did one versus the other, that's $500 million, and you can't even see it. That's why prescriptive analytics is so valuable to organizations, because you can't see it. A human won't figure it out. You need the math to figure that out. And of course, David didn't even come close to the time commits. You take a look at it, he missed, well, here it is. I handed this to him during the show, but he delivered 4 out of 5 packages late. He arrived at 6 businesses after they closed. I mean, it wasn't even close as far as how the business worked. So at the end of the show, we kind of took his clothes and walked him out and said, "We'll see you later." So, all right. What have we seen with Orion so far? So remember, descriptive to predictive analytics. I can't even tell you what we got with descriptive. We started that 20 years ago. Moving to predictive analytics, 85 million miles a year reduced. We have been measuring Orion. We've been working on it for 10 years. We started testing on a small group of drivers, and we grew. And this test will start, this results will start in 2011. We actually have results going back to 2008. They all look identical. So we call this the Orion curve. Let me explain this to you. The red line is UPS as a whole. So this is how everybody in UPS is doing in a performance measure. I think I can tell you that this is, we call stops per mile. So as you're reducing your miles and stops stay the same, you'll see stops per mile increase. So red line is UPS as a whole. The blue line is the buildings that have Orion, and the little black line is the percent of drivers deployed. And what you'll notice is, as more and more drivers get Orion, the difference between everybody else in those Orion centers grow tremendously. We call it the Orion curve. As you put drivers on, it splits out. So that was 2011. We did it again in 12. We did it again in 13. I can't tell you what the numbers are. We do know them, but we're not announcing them yet. But every single time as we move Orion out and we move to the prescriptive analytics, we see this large increase in performance as drivers start using it. So that's why we're excited. That's why we have 500 people working on this full time. We do have an estimate of benefit. We have a benefit estimate range, and right now we're surpassing that. And that's been updated a couple of times, by the way. This is the latest. So we're excited. It's hitting the press, and we're one of the 3% of companies actually doing this. So one more slide, and then I can take some questions. You've heard me talk. I like to listen to a few drivers. We decided to go ahead and film some drivers so that we can communicate internally about the process change for Orion. And as you listen to these drivers, think about a few things. They average about 20 years on road, so they're not newbies. Orion showed them ways to do their job they have not thought about before. So the math will do some things that are very counterintuitive. They got a mileage reduction, and remember the $50 million a mile. You can listen to that and do math in your head. The drivers are asking for real-time optimization. So the way Orion works today is when they leave the building, they get that list and it never changes. They would like that list to be sorted in real time. That's on the roadmap for the future. Navigation's on the roadmap for the future, and a lot of other things, but they'll ask for that. But in anything you're doing with prescriptive analytics, you're talking about change management. You're talking about making people change what they do, and strong management's required and metrics are required, and you listen to that as well. So
it had me go out and run stops earlier in the day that I would have done later on in the day, and after doing them, I did realize on certain days that it was cutting miles shorter because that area had fewer stops in it than what I normally would do.
There are different ways to get to a delivery than what I had known about, and it cut off time as far as I didn't have to backtrack.
It would pick off some stops in the morning that I never really thought about doing in the morning, and it picked off a lot of stops when it was running your air. In other words, most guys would run air to get out of that section, but it left you there to do stops that save miles later on in the day.
For instance, myself, I've been running the same route for 25 years. Orion took me ways, and I was able to make service and make the miles, or even better the miles, take me ways that I've never been before, which was I found very interesting. And there are days I wished I just had Orion.
I dropped 8-10 miles a day from my normal daily route.
You know, a lot of times in the morning I looked at it, it said 110 miles, and I'm usually running 125. I was thinking, no way possible, but a lot of times it did happen.
Be able to go in and look at your GPS position at any point in the day and recalculate the list.
Once you get a premium service package delivered, you can pick up right from where you're at after you optimize and go from there. That would be ideal.
Being able to optimize picking up from deviation from Orion. I would think that'd be the number one thing.
One thing I noticed, and I know you guys are working on, is the real-time optimization.
It'll be great once it's installed.
With looking at the Orion system and some of the things that we were shown as a management team, we knew that our drivers could accomplish the goals that were set. We did have several drivers, particularly one driver who was very resistant, but after some coaching, he accepted the responsibility of decreasing his miles.
So you can edit out that last part. That's good.
So, 55,000 Teamster drivers using the word optimization, that's good for me. So really with all this, we've really turned from, it was a trucking company that has technology. Today we're really a technology company with trucks. Technology drives our business, and the data is now as important as the package, and that's really where we move, and that's where we're headed. And I think I can take some questions. I guess I went quick. Yes? So that's the number one question I get, especially from the GIS audience. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll answer it. Do we take traffic into account? So that answer is no, for a lot of reasons. So let's start with, most of the traffic data I see is on highways, and our drivers only drive highways going to the area and coming back. So it's not very, very helpful when all their time is really spent on the surface roads. That's one. Two, it's not helpful to know traffic today. To know traffic, what it looks like at 8 in the morning, when a driver now needs to deliver, all day long. So, we'd have to take time of day traffic into account, which gets to the third piece, and that's taking time of day traffic into account is really mathematically even much more impossible than what we've done. So we don't yet. Now, do I envision using traffic? Absolutely. We'll use it as a descriptive display for our planners. We'll use it for other reasons. But we really plan our routes not to be in places at times of traffic. So we don't take it into account yet. Yes?
Does sort of local knowledge of the driver ever trump Orion? Like say they know it's very difficult to make a left turn in a certain spot.
Number two question. So the question was, does the driver's knowledge trump Orion? Absolutely, I want that to happen. We want the drivers to use their knowledge and what they see on road and make their own decisions. So, and I can give you a million examples. I'll give you a couple. When we started this project, change management was hard. We've used our drivers to give us information, tell us what's going on, and we didn't want them to think a computer's going to do their job, because it's not. They're professionals. And we changed to, if you heard the driver talk about in the morning, it said, here's the number of miles. We give them a list every morning. They have a little kiosk. They can see the route, and they know the number of miles it's planned at. But we call it beat the computer. And we say, if you can beat this, knock yourself out. So we kind of measure what they do instead. I did have an interesting experience. I was working with a very senior executive, and I was showing him Orion, and he's a brilliant man, great engineer. And we got into this heated argument where he said he envisions telling drivers they have to follow Orion 100% of the time. I said, I don't think so. I said, I think that we'll never be good enough for 100%. And he's now turning red and he's yelling at me. I don't even know why I'm in this discussion, but he's yelling at me, and we're driving in Gettysburg from one place to another. And at that moment, as he's yelling at me to say, give me one reason why we can't follow this 100%, At that point, a car pulls out in front and another car hits it and a big accident occurs and blocks the highway. So I said, what do you want me to do? Orion said, go up there. Do I just sit here till the accident's cleared or do I use my knowledge? And he said, all right, you win. Well, we'll never know all that. You know, one day we'll be able to predict it, but, you know. So I want drivers to use their knowledge. I want this to be a tool that helps them, and I really believe when we get to dynamic, because right now it's static. When it updates in real time and it says, I know you made this decision right now, with that knowledge, now let me reroute for you, I think that'll be great. That's what the drivers are asking for. Yes?
Does Orion take into account walking miles, like New York City where you have like how parking down walk?
So the question was, did it take into account walking miles? That answer is yes and no. New York City is not the target for Orion. You know, places like New York or downtown LA, you spend more time driving around the block looking for a parking place than you do. So it's really not a target. We've planned 0 miles reduction in those areas. On the other hand, we have lots of walking. Residential areas, we do lots of walking. We call it vertical dispatch, going up and down elevators. So yes, it takes that into account. At some level. It's not detailed enough, to be honest, to know that in this apartment building, there's these 8 deliveries. It just knows the apartment building's going to take about this amount of time. So, and remember the chart that said we started with work measurement? We've had that forever. So, you know, 70 years ago, we've been gathering data on how long things take. Yes?
In addition to route analytics, do you also utilize potential customer retention based on your experience as a part of evaluating whether or not this is actually a good overall investment?
So did you say, you said customer retention?
Correct.
To be honest, I don't think I've ever correlated customer retention to Orion, but we have a separate advanced analytics group that does look at customer retention. So, you know, when you talk about advanced analytic or predictive analytics, you'll look at what we call customer churn. So a separate business intelligence group goes through a lot of detailed data and looks for the leading indicators to customers leaving. By the way, they are getting serviced on time, their ease of use, their damages, things like that. So while I don't measure retention directly, they measure that. We do measure service. And are we delivering every package as we said? If you looked at my slides, I did not mention a service increase because Orion, in theory, should not improve service. But the truth is we've seen an improvement in service every place we've gone. We just won't take credit for that. So we are getting to deliveries as we said, and we can handle delivery changes much more easily with Orion. So I can't say I've done the research directly, but everything leads to that we're only improving. Yes?
Looks like you guys come from descriptive or insight, actionable insight. Is there anything on the predicting side that you have adopted to actually feed Orion from a learning system, to learn from the actual outcomes, from the actual experience of the driver, things like that? What is your experience?
The question was, it looks like we jumped from descriptive to prescriptive. We actually, the package flow system had a tremendous amount of predictive inside it, the predicting of deliveries in the future, the changing of tomorrow. There's a lot of prediction inside there, inside that package flow. Are we using data to help reseed Orion? Not yet. That's on the roadmap. In fact, I've got a call on that tomorrow. We have a telematics system that tells us what happened yesterday. So what we don't have yet, and we're working on, is to be able to blend what happened yesterday with what Orion said should happen, put them side by side. The planners do that today, but it's a manual process. This will be 100% side by side in telematics. It's an interesting one because what that's going to do is when you look at what happened yesterday, and this is kind of cool, I think, drivers make decisions. Well, what's the cost of every one of those decisions? So what we're going to do is we're going to rerun Orion for every delivery. So you left the building, we thought you could run 130 miles. After your first stop, you're at 132. So whatever you did cost you 2 miles. Now maybe you picked up a mile here and there, but it'll actually go and look which decisions cost or saved you money. And that way that'll feed back into Orion to let us know the changes. Sorry, yes, sorry.
You always seem to talk in miles, and sometimes miles does not translate directly in time. Do you ever sort of look at that as...
Yeah, and that's a problem. It's easy to describe this in miles. So miles is highly correlated with cost. But the truth is, we're not looking at miles, it looks at cost. So we're really optimizing cost for a day, not miles for a day. But they're so highly correlated. And frankly, I just had to write a blog internally because drivers think, because we talk miles so much, that all looking at is miles. So if we have a road that's a 10-mile-an-hour road for 1 mile, or a 30-mile-an-hour road for 2, it's going to pick the 30. It's going to look at cost. It's really optimizing cost all day long, but it just correlates to miles. Let me grab back there.
Can you speak to change management just a little? With the technology increases, you always have some resistance with the people that are entrenched, but do you find the younger generation coming in that are exposed to video games and all of this are more adept at using the technology?
That's a great question. The change management is the hardest part to make these things work. My belief is that for big projects like this, there's 3 huge projects that you have to take on. The first is a proof of concept. Can the technology even work? And that's an R&D effort, that's a research effort, and as I said, we started that in 2003. Between 2003 to 2007, we spent all of that time just in that first step. Can we make the technology work in a prototype mode? Then the second large project is now that you've got things working in a prototype fashion, build it into processes. And from 2007 to roughly 2011, that's what it took to build them into processes. That's the second large project. But the largest of them all is the deployment, the change management. And so for change management, you need to communicate, you need to over-communicate, you need to educate, you do it all over again constantly. You change metrics. I have a slide that I skipped here, but I'll show the group next week. We change balanced scorecards. We change what people are measured with. We have lagging indicators that I speak to the C-suite about. Here's the money we're saving. But telling the frontline supervisor, here's the money saving or not, doesn't help them. So we have leading indicators for them. And we say, if you do these leading indicators right, we know the lagging indicators will work. And it's they're very highly correlated. And then we educate. I was pleasantly surprised how the younger people are picking this up. It's a different skill set. It's an analytics skill set. And I've been pleasantly surprised. But change management is by far the hardest piece. And so think about this for a moment in terms of analytics. Descriptive analytics, that's easy. Once you know what happened yesterday, you just do what you always did. You see the low-hanging fruit, it's easy to find. If I showed you 2 routes where drivers were all right on top of each other, you could see that quickly. So descriptive analytics is easy. Predictive analytics is a little harder, but it's not that bad, because once you can plan tomorrow and you have good planning tools, the humans making adjustments tomorrow. Prescriptive analytics, by definition, you're saying change what you do. The number of times I get a phone call, I've got a new analytics solution, because we do work not just for delivery, I do work for the airline, I do work for transportation, buildings and facilities. When someone says, this answer is so much different than what I'm doing today, I go, did you really think you were going to do what you do today and get savings? I mean, it's a change that you have to do. And when you're looking ahead, the prescriptive analytics, you need change management. So it's the #1 thing we do. I'm on calls every single week. I know how every individual center is doing. I know how every manager in the company is doing in integrating just by looking at the balanced scorecards. Yes?
So I so much appreciate you sharing this message. So when it comes to sharing the message, have you looked at the cost and benefit of actually sharing this message? with the benefit being we all know about it, and we think that's great, and the cost is maybe your competitors are a little smarter now too. So we're talking about data sharing, and if you solve that, I'd appreciate your insight there.
So is the question, is the question, am I getting payback from talking at a conference? Is that what you mean, or?
I mean, if FedEx heard this message and they started to do things a little differently, that's a cost to your company. But clearly, there's a benefit to your company letting us all have the knowledge of this, this experience, this knowledge.
So,
If you look at that business.
well, I think my boss asks me all the time why I'm doing these things. And honestly, part of it is, our PR department likes getting the message out, right? So that's part of it. I can tell you, I gave a very similar talk to this to our investors in New York City just a few weeks ago. And that became part of it too. The investors wanted to know, you've got a 70-year history of being efficient. You've done the predictive analytics and you saved 85 million miles. The investors said, you got to be done. There can't be anything else that you can get out of this machine. Well, we came and said, no, we got Orion. So Orion is coming. It's a new thing. We took them through many of the slides are from that investor conference. When they left the conference, one of the investors wrote a paper and changed the valuation of our stock, at least his prediction, by a couple of $2 billion. So, is that worthwhile good? Is some of this for the common good, just to communicate? Sure. I don't have a better answer, but our PR department has me on speed dial, by the way. Because the world wants to know, and I don't know why the world does. I'm filming a Bloomberg tomorrow, so Bloomberg's going to come out and want to know what's going on. Remember the chart that said from Gartner, and this is what I really think is happening. 3% of organizations using prescriptive analytics, 16% using predictive. Everybody's talking about big data. We're actually using it. And I think people just want to know, how did you do it? What are you doing with data? And that's why my phone's ringing off the hook. Yes?
Is there any incentives to the drivers, financial incentives, in terms of they're reducing your costs through this program? Do they get any?
Not yet. About half of our drivers are on an incentive. So they're on an incentive already, and this at some level feeds into it. We've been talking about changing the incentive model to add this to the mix, but not yet. I should point out, and then the drivers ask me about this sometimes, they're the highest paid in the industry. Compared to some competitors, about double. So the only way we can continue to afford to pay them and have a future for this company and pay my salary is get more and more efficient all the time. And we'll explain that to the drivers. And they're professional. They're the best in the industry, and they care about their customers. And if we can give them a better way to serve their customers, they're happy too. Yes?
I'm just curious with self-driving cars or self-parking cars or autonomous vehicles, I'm sure you guys at least looked or thought about it. How does that impact it?
We have. And we've looked at it, we said, how would that change the model? How would that impact us? It would certainly be helpful. I'm guessing you're going to need better maps than we've got today to make that a reality. Honestly, I'm disappointed with the quality of maps. I'm disappointed. I bet, when this started, I bet my team that we did not need to do anything different than off-the-shelf maps. Did not need to do so. I think everybody's got a GPS system and nobody's running off cliffs. But when we got answers back, like the one you saw there with Walmart, that was unexpected, I realized we had to update maps. So at some point, if those maps get accurate enough that we all can use, but until then, we'll continue to have what we think are the most accurate maps in the world. Yes? One more. No. Right now, there's no plan for a GIS division. We used to have one, by the way. We used to have a GIS division, and we dropped it. That might have been a bad business decision 20 years ago. But while we won't have a GIS division, or at least I don't envision it yet, we have people doing GIS in 1,000 places, or will. Right now, we're not fully deployed. We won't be deployed until 2017. But when we are, there's 1,000 people that will be using GIS. you know, the editing of those maps are in real time. So I took our COO on our Orion ride. We have a tablet, they go on the ride, and we show them how it works. And the day before the ride, they put up a new sign that said you can no longer make a U-turn. So had to go in quickly, adjust the U-turn sign, that changed the route. So we'll make adjustments in real time based on the feedback from our drivers.